So in yesterday's session, mostly what we saw was like how to create a basic application for struts and how to write some basic configurations, and using those configurations we try to connect a JSP page to a Java file. Okay, so during this process what we did is a JSP file, when it sends a request, the request comes to the application, which is then given to, if it is valid request, it is then given to a JSP, not a JSP action servlet. The action servlet reads the config file, understands the configurations, and then once it understands the configuration, the config file can help us in sending the request to a login to an action form page, or to an action form which is a Java class, where the data will be bound to it, like whatever data that you get, username and password, will be bound to this fields. And if you write validate equal to true, okay, if you write validate equal to where is it? Yeah, validate equal to true in the config for this specific path login, then it will go ahead and call the validate method where we will write all of business validations. Now if the data that is coming from the browser, if it successfully passes all the validations and if there are no errors, then the request will be sent to the login action. But in any other scenario, if something fails in the validate method, then there will be some errors, and the errors, if there are some errors, the user will be redirected to a page which is configured using the tag called input. Since the user is entering some details in the login.jsp page, we would like to take the user back again to login.jsp page and display some results saying that invalid credentials or some business requirements did not match, all those things. Okay. Now the next thing here we did is like, in a happy path, once we go to the login action.java, in this login action.java, which is extending an action class, there is a method by default which we try to uh, use, like an execute method. The execute method is called by default every time, so that the execute method will be called by the action servlet if the data validation is successful. Now, the execute method has four parameters: a mapping object, a form object, a request object, and a response object. The most important thing is, see here, when a login request comes, we are trying to bind a form called my own login form, which is at line number 11. So the data which is coming from the login.jsp will be bound to this model. Okay, will be bound to this model. This model will be sent to our action class, the login action class. So here this form, which is of type action form, must be typecasted into the login form object. Okay, so that is the most important thing that we do. And the other two parameters are request and response. So at any point of time, if we would like to get the data using our old traditional ways of doing, we can always do that. Okay, so using these four parameters, you can do multiple things like, yeah, the my I'm showing displaying my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, I think everyone. Oh no, I think it's just stuck for you. I think Adit maybe just log back in again. Okay, yeah. For everyone else, I'm just continuing there. So the next thing that we did here is like uh, we typecasted the form into the appropriate login form. Okay, and then the next thing that we did is like we just try to print is, we will do the rest of the logic here today, but what we did is like we will perform all the logic, everything, and we will return back an action forward object. Okay, so whatever we are trying to return back, this is nothing but an action forward object. Now in this action forward object there is something called as success. Once it goes back from the execute method, once it returns back from the execute method, the control is again handed over to action servlet. Why? Because action servlet is the one which calls the login actions execute method, right? So whoever is calling this, once the execution is completed, they will be notified back saying that, hey, the execution of the execute method is done and the output is mapping.find forward success. That is what will be told to the action servlet. Now the action servlet will understand that, okay, I am getting a response back from a login action which is called when a URL called login is coming. So it identifies that, okay, this is the action that is happening right now. Now, when an object is returned back from the login action class, which is nothing but an action forward object which contains success, now in this tag from line number 19 to 23, it will look for forward tags. Okay, there are two forward tags. One is success, one is fail. Okay, now it will map either of these tags to the tag which is returning back from the login action.java. So from the login action.java, since it is returning back success, the login.jsp page will be displayed back to the user. Okay, so this is the basic flow in a struts application. And now we will be correlating the same old concept to the struts architecture. But the first thing that I should have explained here is I should have explained the architecture first and then I should have gone into explaining the project. But maybe I just felt that explaining the project with some basic configurations and examples might make more sense instead of explaining this a number of times. Means without knowing all those things, even if I show this diagram initially and explain all this stuff, it might not make sense for you. But the ideal way of learning anytime is like if you want to learn a new framework, the first thing you need to do is understand the architecture of the framework, how the framework is performing and what are the technical stuff present in that and how the functionality goes. So now let's come back and understand the most important thing, the architecture of the Struts framework. So when a client sends a request, so in our scenario, I will always correlate with our example of a login and I will explain that. Okay. So whenever the user sends a request, something like login from a login.jsp, the request first comes to the action servlet. Okay. So when I say the request comes to action servlet, I'm not considering like URL pattern validation and all. So let us assume that I'm getting a URL pattern which is valid that I can handle. So the URL pattern internally invokes action servlet and tells the action servlet to read the struts config file. So everything is good. The action servlet is invoked and it reads the struts config file. And now based on the configurations, what it does is, since the struts config file says validate equal to true, then we will call an action form, which is nothing but a login form which is extending action form in our scenario, and will call the validate method. So once the data is valid, what will we do? We will again tell the action servlet that, hey, the data is valid. So now the action servlet will go ahead and call the execute method in the login action class. So once it calls the login action class, we typecast the form into login form, and this data will be sent to the next layers, the service layer, DAO layer. The DAO layer talks to the database and all this stuff. Okay, now once the request comes back to login action, we will say that, hey, that is a valid credential, so let me send back the response to action servlet, which will take a specific JSP page and will send back a success response to the browser. Or if it is If they are invalid credentials, it will send back the same old JSP page with some errors. That is what is the architecture of Struts framework. And in Struts, there is the important thing that you need to understand is the controller. Okay, the controller is a combination of the action servlet and action class. Okay, so yesterday we might have understood that the controller in Struts is nothing but action servlet. That is what we understood, right? But ideally it is a combination of action servlet and action classes. And action form is nothing but the model which will help us in transferring the data between the action and the JSP pages. Okay, is the architecture clear to everyone? Okay, awesome. So the next step, see here, the next step what I am trying to do here is we already did all these things. We just need to do this part actually. Okay, so what I do here is I'll close my config file. I don't need config file. I don't need web.xml right now. Login form also I'm done with it. Okay. The next thing that I will do here is, okay, before I write a specific package or a class, let me explain the stuff that I'm going to do here. Since we are doing something like an MVC, model view controller, we are trying to decouple all this stuff. If you go back and see our old project, okay, so in the old project, in my JSP project in loginapp.java, this is where I'm getting all the data from the browser. Okay, I'm getting the data from the browser. Then the next step that I do is here itself I'm validating the data, and then from here I will call validate credentials, where I have the same method. If you see here, I have the same method here. Okay, and then get password also, which means the database related method also in the same servlet. So in our old projects, each and everything is written at the same location or at the same place or in the same file, which makes it very, very difficult to maintain. So from now onwards, let us see how I can decouple this kind of scenario. So the first thing that you notice here is in the loginapp.java in our old project, this is where I got the data and immediately I started validating it. But in the struts project, what did I do? I tried to differentiate these two things. The validation is no longer present in loginaction.java. Okay, the validation is no longer present in loginaction.java. It is present in loginform.java. So one second, let me close this and open. So I've created or I have decoupled the validations and I have placed it at a different location. Okay, separate location. Now validations, if I want to do or if I want to make any changes in the validation, I will come to login form. I will never ever touch the login action again for validations. So this way we are trying to separate out all the scenarios of validations and all the things. Okay, now let me show you the next step. The next step is I will write all the business logic in a different class. Okay, so for that what I do here is I will create a new package, service. Okay, here I will say create a class called login service, a more meaningful name. So from login action I will call login service. see here. So what I will do is I will compare everything with what I did first JSP project. So in our JSP project, what did we do in validate credentials? Means this method, we try to compare passwords and all those things and return true or false, right? So this method, I will move out from here and I will place it in login service. Okay, I will explain that. So from this method, we need to call one more method. See here. What is that we are doing from here? Validate credentials. We are calling a method called get password, which is like a database class for me, right? So now I will move this one into a different package in my Struts application. So initially there are errors. I will come back and rectify them one by one. DAO stands for data access objects. Operator class called login DAO and write this method. Okay. For time being, I'm just making sure that controls O, control OK. I'm creating a skeleton, then I will explain all this stuff. Okay. So now, if you understand very carefully, whatever I did in login app.java, the same thing I had split across 4 different classes in this current project. Okay, so if I want to change anything related to the database logic, I will write in this class only. If I want to change anything related to the business logic, like the way I need to compare the passwords, if I want to make any changes for that, I will come to this class only. And in login action, I will see, I will take decisions to decide where exactly I need to go. So in order to take some decisions, one second. So in order to take some decisions, I will use the login action class. This login action class will take decisions to tell the action servlet which page needs to be displayed, and login form is basically used for validations. Okay. So now each class has its own functionality. In future, if your team says that, hey, we need to change the database logic for a login scenario. Why? Because I am making changes to my user table. So I come to my DAO layer and I might have written some query, select something from user table. So what I do is, instead of user table, if the team says that we are making changes as user to user underscore db underscore table or something, I will make changes in this class only. So all other classes will not be affected by this. Okay. So like that, we are trying to decouple the services as much as possible. So let me start coding for that right now. So first, what I had in this scenario, I had something like the login action.java. So in the login action.java, I'm getting all the user details. So I have the username and I have the password. So from here, I will send the username and password to the service layer. Okay. So I'm just removing this out. And in real time scenario, whenever we go, we will not use sysouts. We means at max we will use a logout logging statements. We will see that logging, how to do logging and all, but make sure that don't write sysout statements in real time scenarios. Okay. And never ever sysout sensitive data. When I say sensitive data, like passwords, credit card informations, never ever write sysout in your code saying that sysout password, sysout credit card information. Never ever do that. Okay. So here I say string uname. I'm just writing some shortcuts as username, string username equal to lf dot get username, string password equal to lf dot get password. So I got the username and password. See here team, from here onwards whatever I'm explaining is all basic Java, nothing related to Struts framework here. Only I will be showing you how to write return dot mapping, return mapping dot find forward. This is the only syntax related to this Struts framework that I will be explaining in this flow. Rest all is like creating methods in one class and calling that from another class. That is all is what we will be doing today mostly. Okay, so now I got the username and password. Now I need to send the username and password to login service class so that I can compare the passwords there. Okay, so now what I say is this login service, it will say validate credentials and it will send me boolean as output. So let me create login service ls equal to new login service, control shift o since it is in a different package, so it has imported login service at line number 12. So I say ls dot validate credentials. I'll be passing the username and password to this. And what exactly is this returning back? This is returning back a boolean value. Boolean is valid data or not. So I'm just storing the output in a boolean value. So now here I say if is valid data, then go to a success page, find forward. The naming convention can be anything. Mapping dot find forward ABC, BBC and all. Just writing some meaningful names else. Okay, mapping dot find forward failure. Okay, success and failure. Now let me go back to my struts config page and say if it is a success, I will be going to login success.jsp, and if it is failure, 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 I will go back to login.jsp. This is what is the configuration that I make here. Okay, now the next scenario here is I say login action. So once I come to login action, I have done all the basic stuff. Control Shift F, format the code. Now let me go to validate credentials. In the validate credentials, what I do is, this is a basic step. Here I will try to say create an object for the login DAO. Login DAO. Control Shift O to import the. Okay, done. Now I say login DAO dot get password. I will say get password and I will pass the username. So what exactly this will return back? This will return back a string for me. string string password from DB equal to. Okay. So now let me go to this get password method. So in this get password method, if you notice, all I need to do is I need to connect to the database and then talk to the database and request the database, hey, give me the password for the current user. That is what I need to request. So what I'm going to do here is I will copy an existing code that we have already written in our previous project. Okay, so for that, let me tell the sequence of steps that we need to follow. The first step is the current project must be capable of handling the database. Can this project handle database things? I say yes. Why? Because I already I have already added the MySQL jar in this lib initially. Okay, when I just added all these struts jars, I also added this MySQL connector jar. So now our project is capable of handling the database connections related to MySQL. The first step is done. What is the second step? The second step is go ahead and get a properties file. So when I say a properties file, I hope everyone remembers that in the code we are writing some configurations where we try to connect to the database using a properties file. So how did we read the properties from a properties file? Anyone? Any guess? The answer is we used a class called resource bundle. Okay, we used a class called resource bundle. Now, so let me do that. The first step, the next step that I'm going to do here is in our where is our okay, this is our old app. So let me copy the db parameters.properties, and what I will do here is in our struts project, okay, coming back to our from here I copy the properties file and I will paste it in our dot properties file. So here I will just drop it. It shows db parameters.properties. Now the next thing that I need is db connection from db connection from Java. This is the class that I need. Okay, I copy that one, and since this class can be used by multiple other classes, okay, many classes, see if there are 10 classes which wants to talk to a database, then it means that it is not only being used by one class, it can be used by multiple classes. In those scenarios, what we do is we try to create something called as a package called util, which is nothing but a utility package where the classes in that utility package can be used by multiple things. Okay, so if we want to write or if we want to create a common set of code in our project which multiple people can use it, we will place the classes in utility packages in general. Dot Java dot util. So in here I will copy this class and let me make it a little bit, let me change the name db connection. That's all I say. The next thing that I need to do is the most important change here is in this one, when it reads the resource bundle, when it reads the db parameters.properties file, it goes to the src folder and looks for this file. But in our current scenario, the db parameters.properties is not present in the src folder. It is present somewhere else, which is in excuse me, which is present in a package. So let me change the name here. So I say com slash easy learn java slash properties slash db parameters. Okay, so I just modified that name so that the resource bundle can go to that exact location and read the properties file. So that is done. So it can give the connection. So here property files. Okay, okay, got you, thank you for that. Dot easy learn java dot property files slash db parameters. Okay, very good. Sure. Now the next thing that I do here is again go back to my read operation. Okay, read operation. This is the get password. So I will get this one. I'll copy the entire code, the same code that we are using. If you understand here, whatever code that I'm writing is nothing but let me change this one, db connection, db connection. Okay, Control Shift F, format the code. So see here, what are we trying to do? Same old method again. I'm not going to explain much on this. Get password for this username. So connect to the database. So for that I'm calling get db connection. Then I'm writing a query called select user underscore password from user table, where user underscore name is nothing but the one which I'm trying to pass dynamically, which is being set at line number 22 with the help of prepared statement. Okay, then I am saying that at line number 24 execute query, and 27 I'm just retrieving the password and I'm sending back the password to the caller. So to whom will I send this password? So the login DAO method, get password method, is being called by login service. So I will be sending back the password to this login service class. So now in the login service class, what will we do? Once we get the password from the database, we need to check for some values. I say if null, or I can say if password from DB not equal to null. If it is not null, and password from DB dot equals, okay, dot equals the password coming from the user, if that is the scenario. And one more thing, as I have already explained this scenario, but I just want to stress upon this one. What is this? Password from DB is nothing but a string. Okay, string dot equals, I'm saying string dot. Whenever I say any string or any object dot, and before I do this, if I forget to do this null comparison, if I don't do this, there is a high probability that this comparison that I'm trying to do might throw a null pointer exception. So always make sure that whenever you say object dot, before that you say whether the object is not equal to null. If the object is not null, then only perform this operation. Okay, so in my scenario, if the object is not null, and if the string or if the password coming from the database is equal to the password which the user is trying to enter, in that scenario the result that I need to send back is nothing but return true. Okay, if not just say false. Okay, so to whom am I returning back? The login service validate credentials method is being called from login action. So to this class it is being returned back to line number 26. So if it returns true, it will go to success page. If it returns false, it will go to failure page. Okay, now let me go back, place a debug point and run it, debug it, and show you one more time. And here there is one more thing that I will write here, one more method that I need to explain here. Like a validate, there is something called as reset. Okay, so reset is a method. In general, what happens in this scenario is the reset method basically tries to reset the form data every time it comes to us. Okay, so what I can say here is I can say super.reset, and in the login action, when it goes to the failure page or whatever. Okay, let me introduce you to one more tag that is important in this context. Okay, so the tag that I am going to write here is something similar to action errors tag. Okay, something similar to action errors tag. So let me do one thing, execute this program, let me complete the flow and then explain that scenario. Okay, Debug as debug on server. So just say Raghu secret, hit enter. One second, it's not in debug. Oh, it's in debug mode. I just turned off the debug. Okay, maybe let me show here one more option. Always make sure that you start your browser, the server in debug mode and place debug points wherever you want. Sometimes what happens is like you start placing so many debug points, you might not know where you have placed all your debug points. So for that, what you can do is you can say window, show view, other, start typing in break, B-R-E-A-K. So did you notice here under debug it shows something called as breakpoints. If you double click on this, it opens a prompt. It shows like these are all the locations. See, in authentication filter at line number 35, I have placed one breakpoint. In delete operation at line number 14, I have placed one breakpoint. Like that, it shows all the breakpoints. Now what I did is I see, since instead of going ahead and deleting all the breakpoints, I just selected an option like skip all breakpoints. Did you notice this one? If I press it, click this one, even though I place all the breakpoints in my project, it will not stop at any location. If I again enable this one, so what happens is, did you notice here all the cross marks are gone? So now if I run my application, it will be running in debug mode. Means it will be in debug mode, but it will stop at that breakpoint. So once I did this one, it came to the validate method, which is for the login form. So basically it validates all the data. So I have entered all the valid data. So it should be a happy path. Everything is good. And the error count will be 0. So the I count is 0, which means that there are no errors. So since there are no errors, it will, I will say F8 directly. It will go to the login actions line number 20. It came here to line number 20. Then once I get the data, I store the data in uname and password. Uname is Raghu and PWD password is secret. I will send that data to login service validate credentials. So I say F5 in this scenario. F5 go into that class. Why? Because see, from this login action I want to go inside this method. If you want to go inside a method at any line, press F5. If I press F6, it will not go inside, it will go to line number 28, next line. So I say F5. So this method is called, here I am passing the username Raghu and the password from the browser, which is nothing but secret. Now I am passing these credentials to the DAO layer, the username credential F6, and then at line number 10 I do an F5 again and go into that one, get password. So I came here. So at line number 20 I'm calling the get DB connection. I'm not going into that method, I will just execute it. So I got the DB connection. So if you see the connection, so the connection object is full, which means I got a connection to the database. On that database, I will fire this query. So see the statement object that is going to be executed. It shows select user underscore password from user table where user underscore name equal to Raghu. This is what is being fired. So it will give me back secret. Okay. So it gets the output and it will be printed and it will close everything, and see the password that will be returned back is secret. So the password coming from the database is secret. Now it is given back to the caller at line number 10 in this validate credentials. So the password from the database is secret and it checks, is it not null? Yes, it is not null. Then if the password from the database is equal to the password from password what the user is sending, yes, that is right. So it is a true scenario. Okay, so it is true. It is written back to is validate data. Is data valid? Yes, data is valid. So since data is valid, what happens? It goes to the success page, or means it's like I should not have explained like that. It goes to or we return back an action forward object saying success. The action forward object, which is configured in the struts config file at line number 21 as success, is nothing but go to a page called login success.jsp. So it goes back when I complete the execution. It goes to login success.jsp. So see here, did you notice? It goes to successfully logged into Struts application. Clear with this scenario? Any doubts, any questions till this point? Okay, very good, awesome. So is Struts framework, do you see that this is also something which you can easily understand and work upon if you do some hands-on examples? You feel is it comfortable for you to work on? That's right, very good. Why? Because if you understand the logic, or if you understand what is happening in the background, it is always easy for you to work upon. If you don't understand, it would be very, very difficult for you. So always don't ever blindly start any framework. Understand the architecture, understand the flow, and then only try to do any project. Okay. Now the next step, see, I will be explaining some add-ons in this Struts project right now. So the next thing that I would like every one of you to do is like whatever project that you are trying to implement in a JSP module, like the first project that we saw is like login, then add a registration. Then once the user logs in, then we try to add a change password, right? So try to implement that app in Struts also, the same old app in Struts. Maybe in tomorrow's session, or if not on Sunday session, maybe I will try to show a detailed example of how to create a session and how to maintain a session for a user, so that we can understand that okay, since the user has logged in, we maintain a, maybe I will explain that maybe tomorrow or day after what is that login scenario and all those things. Okay, but my suggestion is to make sure that you start working on this and start adding multiple functionalities. Okay, now the next thing that I will be explaining here is all add-ons. So for that, let me go back, and there is a concept called struts dispatch action. Okay, struts dispatch action, let's look into that struts dispatch action. And most of you, like I suggest, like maybe take this example not only for struts. If I say this is one pretty good website that I find, where it has a lot of examples that is given, that are given, like not only for struts, spring, core, java, different frameworks, see java, spring, selenium, lot of things. He has given a lot of very good examples in very clear and understandable way. So if you go to struts 1, in struts 1, maybe if you go to this framework, and what you can do is like you can basically start with struts hello world action, then config the struts welcome page, multiple struts config files, then forward action, dispatch action. Like that means one basic thing that I say is not everything is important, but if you know multiple things, it is always beneficial for you. Okay, so if you, when you get free time, make sure that you go back and try to understand the concepts. Yeah, for example, if you take the example of a text box, okay, which he has given. Okay, maybe the basic drawback right now is like I did not explain you the concept of a Maven project. We are dealing only with dynamic web projects. So that might be one thing which you might not be able to understand even if you look at the concepts. Okay, maybe I will try to explain that Maven projects in a day or two so that we can explain all these things. But if you see at a high level, here he is creating an action class which is extending action and execute method mapping dot find forward success. So all he is trying to do is like explain how the data which is returned on a text field. So let me show you. Say something. He is trying to say something like create a simple text field, say submit and reset. So if he submits, it shows like name is required without entering anything. Okay, without entering anything, if he says submit, it says name is required. The next thing that he's going to do is like if he enters something like Mike Young and says submit, it displays a message called welcome Mike Young. Okay, so this is the message which is being displayed. So this is a simple app which is created for explaining the text box. So these are some websites which give you a lot of meaningful examples and all. At least just make sure that you keep a track of that website, and you can go ahead and understand some examples of that if you want. Okay. So now the next example that we are looking into is called as is something related to dispatch action. Okay, something related to dispatch action. Now what is this dispatch action and how does it differ from the action class that I'm trying to create here? The first thing that you need to notice in this login action is anytime and every time you try to come to this login action class, I said that by default the execute method will be called every time. That is what I told. That is right. But now there might be some scenarios, okay? There might be some scenarios where you want to call different methods when different buttons or links or whatever is clicked, right? So is there a probability or is there an option for you to call different methods in a Struts application or not? The answer is yes. Apart from execute method, you can also write your own custom methods. Like I can say Raghu, Naveen, A, B, C. I can write methods with those names and I can call those methods also. Okay. So how can I call those methods? So what exactly Struts says is, hey, if you want to follow a default process, extend an action class where by default the control comes to the execute method. Now if you don't want to come to this execute method, if you want to go to a different method called add or subtract or multiply or divide, then instead of extending action, all you need to do is extend dispatch action. Okay, instead of extending action you need to extend dispatch action. So the same I'm trying to explain with an example which is already predefined here. So see here, this is my action class which is nothing but language select action which is extending dispatch action. Now I'm not extending action, I'm extending dispatch action. So once I extend the dispatch action, what I can do is I can write my own custom methods. See, the most important thing that I say here is when I say I can write my own custom methods, see the naming conventions, observe the input parameters, observe the return type. Okay, observe all these three things. What is the return type? Action forward. Now if I go back to the example, action forward is the return, action forward is the return, action forward is the return. For everything, action forward is the return type. Now the next thing that I want you to observe is what are the input arguments. The input arguments are mapping object, action mapping, action form, HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response. It is exactly the same here also. Action mapping, action form, HTTP servlet request, servlet response, everywhere. If you notice what exactly is the difference between our class and the next class, the difference is instead of extending action, you extend dispatch action. Instead of writing execute, you write your own custom method names. That is the only difference. Okay. Now here I say a method name called Chinese. Here I say a method name called English and some German. Like that, I can create multiple methods here. Okay. Now the next target is how can I call a method called Chinese? How can I call a method called English? That is my next concern. So I need to do some additional mappings here. In the previous scenario, I need not do any additional mappings. Why? Because Struts framework by default will call the execute method. Okay. Now in this current context, observe very carefully. The methods are Chinese, then English, then German, then France. Okay. Last one is France here. So these are the four methods that we have right now. The next thing that I will explain here is, oh, it did not give anything. Sometimes not everything might be present. Okay, see here I'm explaining this. The same old concept. Dispatch action. The method names are create, delete, update, block. Four methods. Okay. So create, delete, update, and block. Four methods are there. Now, okay. What is the class name? The class name is user management action. Okay. Class name is user management action. Now in my struts config.xml, I am calling user management action here, and I say the path, I say the type, and he is not worried about validate and all, so he did not write all those things, and he wrote the forward. If you notice the difference between the action tag mappings that we did and that are present here, the only additional thing that you need to notice here is an additional parameter called parameter equal to parameter. See, this name can be anything. This name can be ABC or BBC, ABC, BBC, anything. Okay, this name can be anything. But what exactly is that name, or how exactly it will help us? Let us see that. So what I do is, let me go take an example of this screen. See here. This is my login page. In my sorry, not login page, some JSP page. In my JSP page, if I click on this link, notice the URL pattern. The URL pattern shows here is user.do parameter equal to create. So if I click on create user, I will send create from the browser onto the server as an additional parameter. If I click on delete, I will send parameter equal to delete as an additional parameter from the browser to the server. Now my question to everyone, if I click on update, what is the additional parameter that I will send to the server from the browser? Mhm. Very good. It is not update user, it is just update. Yeah, very good. Parameter is equal to update, to be more precise. Okay. So now what is that we are trying to send? We are trying to send some different names when we click on some buttons, right? So if I show you the JSP page, okay, if I show you the JSP page, see, this is the JSP page. In this JSP page, he has already written saying that user.do. See, ideally what we will send is user.do is what we will send. But apart from user.do, if I click on this create user, he is sending a parameter called create. Here delete and update and block. That is what he is sending. Now on the browser, if it is sending a create, it will come to the server side, and on the server side it will check, hey, is there something called as a parameter which is coming from the browser. Is it yes or no, team? Yes, a parameter is coming. Now, again, the same old question. When I click on update, what is the parameter that is coming? Very good. The parameter that is coming from the browser when I click on update is nothing but a string called as update. So it takes or reads this parameter value as update, and it will go to this user management action class, and since the user management action is extending the dispatch action, it will not call the dispatch execute method. It will call the method which has the exact same name as the string which is coming from the browser. So what is that? It is coming from browser. Everyone told that update is what coming from the browser. So did you notice here? This is the method that will be called for you when you click on update link. When you click on delete, the parameter that will be coming from the browser is delete. So delete method will be called. So if you are using a dispatch action, then you need to tell your action class that what exactly is the method that you want to call from the browser, so that the exact method on the server side can be called. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. So this is one more thing, like action, dispatch action. Okay. Always remember, team, like there are many concepts that we need to cover, but not everything is important. That does not mean that you should not know all those things. Just try to explore more and more concepts in Struts. You will start understanding many scenarios. Okay, but start with the basics. Then, as and when you start building the projects, as and when you start googling with okay how to do this, how to do that, you will get more, or you will come across a lot of other scenarios. Okay, now the next scenario that I'm going to explain is, means I don't say it's confusing, but this is one part where people always ask me like to repeat basically. So I'm just telling to everyone like please pay extra attention to what I'll be explaining now. And I will be explaining something called as tiles framework. And in general, I prefer every one of you to understand tiles and start using tiles if you want to build uh, an application which is seriously maintained, which you need some maintenance in the future and all. Like if you're trying to build a big project, and if you need some good maintenance, all that stuff and all, it is always preferable to use these kind of additional plugins. Okay, the tiles that we are trying to use is nothing but a plugin or an additional feature that is given to the Struts framework for easy maintainability and easy maintenance of the project layout and all those things. Okay, so let's understand like what is the problem. uh, Not here, maybe. See here, what I'm trying to explain here is a basic layout of a website. Okay, initially. So Let us assume that there is a website called abc.com. Okay, a company called ABC. So abc.com has a website like this. So this is a website. Okay, now in this website, this is a page called header.jsp where header page is present. All the header part like menu and all those things will be present. And this is a page which will display the footer content saying that copyright content, blah blah blah, whatever links and all additional all this information, email, all those things will be present here. And then there is one more thing called the left navigation bar. Okay, so the left navigation bar sometimes might be here. If you say Google, it has an inbox, outbox, sign in, sign out, and here it has all the settings, all those things, and at the bottom it has some copyright or whatever stuff, right? So this is a basic layout of an ABC company website. Now let us assume that the ABC company has 100 pages. So in general, I'm talking about a general scenario. Will all the 100 pages look alike? When I say alike, will all the 100 pages have the same structure like this or not in general? Yes, right? So all the pages in that website will have the same structure, displaying like here it has some menu, on the left hand side it has some links, bottom it has some information, and in the center it will display the actual content that it wants to display. Well and good, everything is good. Now the next scenario is, after some time the company wants to redesign its website. Okay, the 100 pages will remain the same, which is like login page, success page, all those pages will remain the same. But what happens when the company wants to redesign the website, saying that, hey, I want to add, instead of adding the links on the left hand side, I want to add the links on the right hand side. Okay, here is what I want to display the links. Okay, now my question to everyone, when the company wants to make this kind of change, in how many pages the company will make code changes, or in how many pages the company needs to make code changes? What is the answer? Any guess? The answer is all the 100 pages it needs to go and change. Why? Because if you take a login.jsp, okay, if you take the login.jsp, in the login.jsp, first they will add these details, they will include this header.jsp, include footer.jsp, and in the design they will say on the left hand side display the menu. That is what they will tell in login.jsp. Same is the case in success.jsp. Same is the case in register.jsp. But now when it needs to shift the menu from left side to right side, they need to open all the 100 pages and needs to mention in all the 100 pages that, hey, go ahead and change the menu from left hand side to the right hand side. So they need to make changes in all the 100 pages. Is that clear to everyone? Yes or no? Okay, so maybe for that, I'm just trying to build a simple app that I would like to show to you maybe tomorrow or day after. Let me just run it once quickly and show you the layout, which might help you. Awesome. Uh, okay, okay. I made many changes in this one. I guess like there are some issues that needs to be resolved, I guess. Okay, I will explain this later. I will show that example later in the process of changing something. But maybe uh, if I show you the JSP page directly that I'm trying to go here. So if you say the login.jsp, so in the login.jsp, if you see here, mm, so here I wrote a header section, and this is the content which I need to display on the center, and this is the footer information. Okay, so I'm not sure if I have that page, this one demo page to show you. Yeah, I don't think I do. That's fine, not a problem. And if I say a login success page, in the login success page, I had went back and redefined again, saying that here the header should be something like this, and it has these navigations on the left hand side, and it has the center content which needs to be displayed like this, and it has the footer which needs to be displayed, which means in all the 100 pages I did like this. Now if the company decides like, hey, the navigation should not be on the left hand side, it should be on the right hand side. If the company decides that, I need to go to all my 100 pages and I need to go back and modify them. But here in Struts framework, what exactly the Struts framework says is, hey, if suppose if the company wants to make the design changes or the layout changes, you need not go to all the 100 pages. I say that make the changes only in one location, which will reflect in all 100 places, or which will be effective for all 100 pages. That is what Struts framework says. Okay. Now for that, we will be using something called as the tiles framework. Okay. So the tiles framework means, before I explain the concept of tiles, okay, uh, I will explain one example. I'm not sure if that is a good or bad example, but I would just like to explain that. So let us assume that there are 5 people who wants to go on a tour. Okay, if 5 people wants to go on a tour, if you hire a car, then the seating will be something like 3 people will be sitting in the back and 2 people will be sitting in the front. Okay, now if you take something bigger one which is much spacious, you might sit in a different way, something like 2 people in the front, 2 people in the back, and one person in between them, right? So it means like, based on the type of car that you are choosing, you can always choose the seating arrangements, right? The placement. So what is happening, if the car changes, the seating can also change automatically, or you can basically decide upon that, right? The same is the case here. What exactly Struts says is, the Struts framework says that, let me take one more paint. So here what I will do here is, I'll quickly create a template, and the framework says something like this. Hey, create a template, template 1, and name it as template 1. Now let us say initially the company wants to display the pages in this format. So tell everyone that you need to use template 1. So in this template 1, what you do here is, one quick question to everyone. take any website, google.com or ABC or Yahoo or anything. Will the header, the footer, the left nav, will they remain same almost across all the pages, or will they change? Exactly, very good. Which means the content on the header, footer and left nav are same. Exactly. Some in very rare scenarios they change dynamically, but most of the scenarios they are all same, right? So now what exactly the struts styles framework says is it will create a template for you. The template will look like this. So in the template it will say this is header.jsp, which will never change. So you hard coded this one as header.jsp, and this one you have hard coded as, okay, that is menu.jsp, and this one is footer.jsp. So the framework says that, hey, when I choose a template one, I hard code saying that header.jsp, footer.jsp, menu.jsp, and whatever is being displayed in between is dynamic. Okay, so we never know what is coming. If I log in, it will show. If I log in, it will show me this login.jsp page, and if it is success, it shows me login.success page. So the concept here is every time these three things are common and only this one changes, right? Now what exactly the framework says is the dynamic value will be populated by some methodology that we will see that. But if the company decides to go with a different template called template 2, okay, template 2, even in the template 2, this is header.jsp, this is footer.jsp, and this is like menu.jsp. So all these things are same, and again navigation changes. So do you need to change anything at a coding level? Coding level, you never change anything. All you need to change is configurations. Okay, so initially you will tell everyone to use template 1, then you will tell people to use template 2. So that is the only change that you need to make. That is what will be explained in tiles framework. So the diagram that is being shown here might be very a little bit confusing. So what I want every one of you to do is like understand the concept here. The first one that is being shown here in green, blue and green is nothing but the template one. Okay, so the template one initially is calling as common layout.jsp. Okay, so when we are going when we are using framework, we are saying that I am using a common layout. Now in the common layout, what exactly is header? See header, if you follow this one, header is nothing but header.jsp. It will hard code as header.jsp. Then what is footer? Footer is nothing but footer.jsp is hard coded. Then what exactly is the body? The body is nothing but user body.jsp, which is nothing but a dynamic content or a dynamic value which will be coming. So the first thing that needs to be done here is like you need to add the files library in your project. Then or else instead of doing like this, maybe let me do one thing. Let me just download this project, load it into my Eclipse and explain it to you. So it would be like an easy process for you to understand. Why? Because mm, I definitely feel that this might look a little bit confusing for you if I go ahead and straight away explain all these things. For me, it might look like an easy concept, but for you, it might be a little bit confusing initially. So let me not explain the tiles framework today. I will take it to tomorrow, and I will try to complete the tiles framework tomorrow. Okay. So apart from the tiles framework, any other questions or any doubts? Anyone? No questions? No doubts?